Although he looks exactly like Peter Griffin, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves has none of the popularity. Reeves is currently one of the most unpopular governors in America, especially because of his poor handling of the Jackson water crisis, which angered many Mississippians. And it is not only that, but the fact that Mississippi has made basically no progress under the governorship of Tate Reeves. In fact, Mississippi still ranks near or at the very bottom of many rankings such as education, healthcare, and poverty. It is so bad that neighboring southern states have continued their tradition of saying, "Thank God for Mississippi." Reeves is so unpopular that he almost lost the state of Mississippi in his governor election in 2023. In fact, he won by a mere 3 percentage points. And compare this to Donald Trump, who just 1 year later won the state by 22 points. So Mississippi is no swing state. It is far from it. And Reeves almost losing the state shows just how unpopular he is. And while Tate Reeves is extremely unpopular, he is by no means Mississippi's worst governor in their state history. He is far from it. So, in this video, we're going to look at the worst governor in every state's history, starting with Alabama and ending with Missouri. Part 2 will go in between the states of Missouri and Wyoming alphabetically. So, starting with the state of Alabama. Alabama's worst governor is George Wallace. When you think of Alabama governors, if you know history, the first person who automatically comes to mind is this man. George Wallace is known for his extreme racism and support for segregation during his terms as governor. While many have argued that George Wallace wasn't truly racist and he was just trying to make sure he would be popular and well known as well as have a lot of power, that doesn't excuse his actions. In fact, all that shows is George Wallace is an exceptionally power-hungry figure. In his early terms, George Wallace was responsible for creating divisiveness in Alabama and refused to repudiate any hate crimes such as the extremely abhorrent 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, which ended up in the deaths of 4 African American girls who were very young, by the way. And Wallace didn't condemn or do anything to address this terrorist attack. He also was very friendly with the KKK. He did nothing against them. And in fact, he may have even actively encouraged acts of violence done by terrorist organizations. And while George Wallace did change later on in his final governorship term in the 1980s, in fact, in this term he appointed a record number of African Americans to offices in Alabama, and he declared himself to be extremely repentant for his past actions. This doesn't change how destructive his first governorships were to not only Alabama, but the United States as a whole, becoming a symbol of Southern resistance to civil rights. Next up, we have the state of Alaska. From Alaska, its worst governor is Frank Murkowski. Alaska is one of the harder states on the list, mostly because of the fact that they don't really have a lot of governors in their history, but Frank Murkowski stands out to me because he was extremely friendly with lobbyists, oil, as well as coal, and was noted for being very corrupt. And this isn't even the worst thing about Murkowski, because what really stands out for me for him is the fact that he appointed his own daughter to the United States Senate seat. This is extreme nepotism at its finest, and that is the main reason why I have Murkowski here on the list. Next up, we have the state of Arizona. From Arizona, I would say their worst governor is Evan Mecham. Like Alaska, Arizona doesn't really have any governors that stand out for being exceptionally bad like Alabama does with George Wallace, but Mecham does kind of stand out as Arizona's worst governor, even if he wasn't exceptionally bad. Mecham was known for refusing to comply with MLK Day and forced people to work on that day, which led to many businesses not wanting to invest in the state of Arizona and hurt the state's economy. And this led to economic ruin there, and Mecham was also involved with other shady things that ended up, I believe, with him being impeached for his crimes. Although Mecham isn't as corrupt or as racist as some other governors on the list, he still does stand out as a black stain on Arizona's history. Next up, we have the state of Arkansas. Arkansas's worst governor is Jeff Davis. For me, it was hard to decide between Jeff Davis and Orville Faubus, who were both pretty bad governors, but I ultimately went with Jeff Davis because while Faubus did try to stop integration from happening, Jeff Davis stands out for me because not only did he turn a blind eye to lynching and racial violence, but he actually defended and encouraged it, which is something that many other Southern governors didn't go as far as doing. Davis also openly tried to divide the state and openly tried to use an us versus them kind of mentality when it came towards poor whites and African Americans. And while he did have some accomplishments regarding reform, he, at the end of the day, was extremely racist and also was responsible for a ton of racial violence in Arkansas. Next up, we have the state of California. California's worst governor is Pete Burnett, who was also their first governor. Pete Burnett was known for, like Davis and Wallace, being exceptionally racist. He tried to ban all free blacks from entering the state of California, and he also engaged in genocidal acts against Native Americans, and he also tried to ban Chinese immigrants from entering California. Oh yeah, and he also tried to make sure that Mexicans wouldn't get the same land rights as whites did in the state. So this bottom line, a complete a-hole and racist at that, and that is why he is, for me, easily the worst governor in California's history, and one of the worst governors in American history in total, simply because of his acts of violence and genocide. Next up, we have the state of Colorado. Colorado's worst governor is Clarence Morley. Morley was an active supporter of the KKK and may have even been a member of the organization himself. Morley was heavily influenced by the KKK's views regarding immigrants, specifically German immigrants who were targeted in Colorado, and he also implemented many anti-Catholic laws into place. So, yeah, Morley stands out as a black stain in Colorado's history when they were influenced by the KKK. Next up, we have the state of Connecticut. Connecticut's worst governor is William T. Minor. Like Morley, Minor was extremely anti-immigrant and was a member of the Know Nothing or Nativist Party, which was extremely anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, you name it. Minor played a role in the xenophobia and even tried to encourage it within the state of Connecticut and attempted to ban many Irish Catholic immigrants from entering the state. Next up, we have the state of Delaware. Delaware's worst governor is James Ponder. Ponder was governor immediately during Reconstruction, and during this time period, he attempted to discourage African American voting rights and civil rights within the state of Delaware and refused to comply with Reconstruction by President Ulysses S. Grant. Next up, we have the state of Florida. Florida's worst governor is Sidney Katz. Katz is very similar to Jeff Davis in the sense that he not only turned a blind eye to racial violence, but he also encouraged it, which is very horrific. And unlike Davis, Katz was also very corrupt and was probably involved in a embezzlement scheme, as well as he was bribed by many people who sought his pardon for crimes that they committed. So, like Davis, he was racist, but he was also very corrupt, which is why I think he is overall the worst governor of the two, and he is also, no doubt, Florida's worst governor in their state's history. Next up, from Georgia, we have Governor Wilson Lumpkin, who is also one of the worst in American history. Lumpkin was responsible for the removal of the Cherokee from Georgia. Although the Cherokee were peaceful, Lumpkin attempted to forcibly remove them, and this conflict is what ultimately played a role in Andrew Jackson signing the Trail of Tears, or the Indian Removal Act, into law, which led to the Trail of Tears. So Lumpkin is equally, if not more, responsible than Andrew Jackson for the Trail of Tears, which led to tens of thousands of innocent Cherokee dying. Next up, we have the state of Hawaii. Hawaii's worst governor is George Ariyoshi. Hawaii was one of the hardest ones on this list, mostly because they didn't really have any bad governors, so to speak. So I had to pick Ariyoshi, who did actually have his fair share of accomplishments, but he was accused of several corrupt actions, such as investing in such as being involved in embezzlement, as well as allegedly being in charge of a crime ring. Although, again, these are both rumors, but still, the presence of these rumors is what makes Ariyoshi the worst governor from Hawaii, in my opinion. Again, Hawaii doesn't really have any bad governors in its history, so I have to put Ariyoshi here, even though he is innocent until proven guilty. Next up, we have the state of Idaho. From Idaho, their worst governor is Edward A. Stevenson. Stevenson technically wasn't even governor of Idaho when the state was a state, but was the governor when it was a territory, so I'm still going to count him here. Stevenson was responsible for the exclusion of Chinese immigrants from the state of Idaho and played a role in the Chinese Exclusion Act ultimately becoming a law, as well as in the future further discriminatory acts against the Chinese. Similarly to Catt and Davis, Stevenson ignored racial problems in the state as well as racial violence committed by whites against Chinese citizens and really refused to do anything about it and may have even secretly encouraged this violence. Next up, we have the state of Illinois. Illinois' worst governor for me is Len Small. Small is one of the most corrupt governors in American history and particularly stands out in a state like Illinois, which has had 5 to 6 governors who have been convicted of crimes. For me, the reason why Small stands out is because of his embezzlement. And while other Illinois governors did this, he actually did this to an unprecedented extent that the other governors did not do, and also issued many pardons to criminals who were involved in stuff such as bootlegging, and also pardoned more than 1,000 convicted felons in total, especially one convicted felon who was convicted of kidnapping young girls and then forcing them into prostitution, which is insane. Small also was involved in jury tampering and may have even bribed jurors to make sure he was not convicted of his crime. So, because of this, Len Small is to me the worst governor in Illinois history. Next up, we have the state of Indiana. Indiana's worst governor is Edward A. Stevenson. Stevenson was also involved with the KKK, just like Clarence Morley, although Stevenson's involvement with the organization may have been more so out of fear and trying to protect his political career rather than what Morley did, which was active involvement with the Klan. And I know I said Edward A. Stevenson, which is wrong. This is actually Edward L. Jackson, the governor of Indiana. Both of them have similar names, so it's easy to miss that up. But anyway, Jackson was mostly involved with the KKK because, again, the KKK had a lot of influence in Indiana during this time, which is in fact very surprising. And he was intimidated by the group to a large extent and was heavily influenced by the KKK's policies. He also was an extremely strong supporter of prohibition, which was known to be a massive failure. So overall, I have to put Edward L. Jackson as the worst governor of Indiana due to the KKK's influence over him, as well as his strong support of a failed policy. Next up, we have the state of Iowa. Iowa's worst governor is William Harding. Harding was known for instituting a law that effectively banned anyone from speaking a language outside of English in his state. This is exceptionally egregious and was meant to target many immigrants in the state. And Harding was also known for being particularly corrupt, having accepted a bribe in a case where a man was convicted of raping a 17-year-old girl, and ultimately Harding ended up pardoning him, and a large part of this was due to the belief that Harding may have been bribed. While there is no definitive proof, there is a lot of circumstantial evidence that ties to the fact that Harding was bribed to pardon this man who raped a 17-year-old. Next up, we have the state of Kansas. Kansas also is a state which, to their credit, hasn't really produced a ton of bad governors, but for me, their worst governor has to be Sam Brownback. And while this may be controversial because Brownback recently left office, the reason why I'm saying Brownback is the worst governor in Kansas history is because of the fact that he ultimately ended up instituting a disastrous tax cut plan that was the biggest in Kansas history, but this was a massive disaster because it caused massive deficits and for the total government revenue to collapse. And this left Kansas unable to address issues such as education and transportation. And ultimately, this tax cut was so disastrous that Brownback ended up resigning to become the ambassador of another country. But it's kind of obvious why he did actually resign, and he was probably the least popular governor in America during his time as governor of Kansas. And he was so bad that Kansas ultimately ended up electing a Democrat after he left office. Next up, we have the state of Kentucky. Kentucky's worst governor is Joseph Daisha. Daisha was governor during a very turbulent time in Kentucky history. During this time, there was constant conflict between pro-Daisha and anti-Daisha factions known as the Old Court and the New Court in Kentucky. And Daisha played a role in this division becoming even worse. And the main reason why I have Daisha on this list is because of when he ended up pardoning his son who was charged with murder. His son did commit the murder and was convicted. However, Daisha used his office corruptly and tried to pardon his son. While it is good to be sticking out for the interests of your family, Daisha did so when his son was convicted of murder, and this is basically a prime example of governor corruption, just like how Frank Murkowski appointed his daughter to the Senate, although I would say this is a more egregious example. Next up, we have the state of Louisiana. Louisiana's worst governor is Edwin Edwards, and this is saying a lot because, like Illinois, Louisiana has had a ton of bad governors in their state's history. The reason why I have Edwin Edwards, though, as Louisiana's worst governor is because of how much corruption he did when he was governor of Louisiana. He was found guilty of multiple counts of racketeering and also was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. This is insane, and the only reason why he was in office for so long was because for one of his governor runs, even after people knew of his corruption, he was literally running against David Duke. In fact, people were saying, vote for the crook, it's important, because of who his opponent was. But this still doesn't change how bad of a governor Edwin Edwards was regarding his corruption. Next up, we have the state of Maine. Maine's worst governor is Ralph Brewster. Again, similar to Edward L. Jackson as well as Clarence Morley, Ralph Brewster was another northern governor who was involved with the KKK. And the KKK didn't really have all that much influence in the state of Maine, which makes this extremely egregious. Brewster was also involved in an election that was allegedly rigged, and that ultimately helped him get to office. Brewster was also very anti-immigrant and was also a part of the Red Scare McCarthyism during his tenure as governor of Maine. So, yeah, overall, Brewster was just the worst governor in Maine's history. Next up, we have the state of Maryland. Maryland's worst governor is Thomas Holliday Hicks. Hicks was governor when Maryland was in the Civil War and was a border state, and Hicks did absolutely nothing to help the Union, who was trying to keep Maryland as a border state rather than a Confederate state. While Hicks pledged loyalty to the Union, he did so in a very weird way. Despite supporting the Union, he tried to burn bridges that would allow Union troops into his state, and he also did nothing to really help the Union war effort and was accused of trying to secretly help the Confederates at times. But the other thing why Hicks is the worst governor in Maryland's history, in my opinion at least, is because, again, he was a member of the Know Nothing Party, and thus he practiced extremely anti-immigrant policies when he was the governor of Maryland. And his governorship was, in fact, considered fraudulent to begin with because the 1858 Maryland governor election was involved in a ton of vote rigging as well as cheating by both Hicks and the Democrats. Although Hicks's party, the Know Nothings, did a lot more cheating than the Democrats did. They were doing stuff like intoxicating voters to make sure they would or would not vote, kidnapping, and all sorts of really egregious things. Next up, we have the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts' worst governor is Henry Gardner. Henry Gardner, again, another member of the Know Nothing or Nativist Party. Gardner, like other Know Nothing governors, tried to stop. Gardner, like other Know Nothing governors, tried to make sure that immigrants would not get into the state of Massachusetts and made life as hard as possible for Catholics and was extremely nativist. Also, unlike many Massachusettsians who were very abolitionist, Gardner was the complete opposite and didn't really do anything to try to help the abolitionist cause. And in Massachusetts, he also attempted to even enforce fugitive slave laws, which were not only unconstitutional, but also very cruel. Next up, we have the state of Michigan. Michigan's worst governor is Kim Sigler. Sigler is the worst governor in Michigan history for me, mostly because of how incompetent he was. Michigan hasn't really had any actively bad governors, but Kim Sigler kind of stands out for just being a very ineffective and incompetent governor. He was governor following the end of World War II, and during this time period, the state of Michigan was involved in many labor riots as well as an economic ruin. And Sigler didn't really do anything to help the issue, and was just an ineffective governor, which is why he served such a short period of time. Next up, we have the state of Minnesota. Minnesota's worst governor is Alexander Ramsey. Ramsey was a territorial governor of Minnesota and was governor when the state was trying to figure out what it would do regarding Native American policy in its early stages. And he even declared an extermination order against the Lakota tribe in Minnesota, which is very egregious and is just as bad as Wilson Lumpkin's order to remove the Cherokee, except Ramsey took it a step further and tried to forcibly kill many of the Lakota. The reason why I don't think Ramsey is as bad as Lumpkin, though, is because the Cherokee were peaceful and actually tried to integrate within the whites living there. The Lakota, though, although it was their land to begin with, they did do violent stuff against many white settlers, which is why it is somewhat, at least, rational why Ramsey did what he did. But Ramsey also took it a step further than Lumpkin did. But at the same time, he also did target some innocent people, just like Lumpkin. So for me, that is why Alexander Ramsey is the worst governor in Minnesota's history. Next up, we have the state of Mississippi. Mississippi's worst governor is Theodore Bilbo. Bilbo was a member of the KKK and was extremely racist against African Americans in the state of Mississippi, and also was very bad regarding just overall competence in general. He was involved in, like other Southern governors during this time period, didn't do anything to try to stop lynching and may have even actively encouraged it. And during his tenure as governor of Mississippi, Bilbo, despite trying to implement progressive reforms, what he did was just the complete opposite, and he actually ended up firing a lot of teachers in the state, and this ultimately screwed over Mississippi's economy, and also did nothing to try to help many of the veterans in the state, many of whom were African American. So, yeah, overall, what Bilbo did was absolutely egregious, and he just hurt education in Mississippi. He also was terrible regarding race relations, and he also was involved in corruption, having embezzled, and also being involved in bribery. Next up, we have the state of Missouri. Missouri's worst governor is Lilburn Boggs. Boggs stands out as the worst governor of Missouri because of his extermination order against the Mormons. This would have targeted thousands of Missourians and is a hate crime, just plain and simple as that. So, yeah, because of the extermination order, Boggs stands out as the worst governor in Missouri history. Well, alright guys, thank you for watching part 1 of this 2-part video, and stay tuned for the release of part 2. Mr. U.S. History, out.